let's start, and let me hand over to Mark for his presentation. And I wish you a fun evening. Mark, go ahead.
Can everybody hear my voice? All right. Thank you, Suzanne, for your introduction and your friendly words. So my name is Mark. I'm a content designer at Informaat. You already saw my colleague, Iñigo. He's a service designer. Tonight's topic, content meets service design. I'd like to tell you something about, well, what is content, something about content design and content strategy. And after that, I'd like to zoom in on some of the similarities between our fields of service design and content design. And in the third part of my presentation, we'll zoom in on the customer journey, and we'll propose to enrich a customer journey with content or content considerations. And if the presentation is done, we'll all pull up our sleeves and get to work and try to make a real content journey. But we'll see about that later. First, it might be nice if I share some of my observations from my personal customer content journeys with you. For instance, this one. Some while ago, I ordered a new broadband router with my broadband and TV provider. And after submitting my order, I received an email. And I saw the words, your order, uw bestelling. I also recognized the name of the provider, Ziggo. But the rest of the contents of this email really bears no information for me. I'm already looking at this mail in my browser, and the client number and the other characteristic has no meaning to me. So this is not really an incentive to open this mail, which is a risk, of course, for both parties involved, because if there were something wrong with my order, this might be the appropriate moment to put it right again. Anyway, within a minute, a second email popped in. Probably the first one was some kind of auto response that triggered a customer care email. And look, this one has words that I do recognize. I see my name, Mr. M.A. Westbeek. That's a pretty formal way to greet me. I also see that there's an attachment in PDF format. Probably that's my order and I can check it. Curious though, they call me pretty formal Mr. M.A. Westbeek, but in the email subject, they are not being formal. They say je bestelling instead of uw bestelling, which would be the formal form in Dutch. And the strangest thing is that the first email, which was pretty impersonal, had this formal subject, uw bestelling. So in this step of my customer journey, Ziggo talks in two tones of voice to me, and it's a bit confusing. In English, you always say you to the user. But in Dutch and German and French, for instance, we have two separate forms. A formal way of addressing the user. In Dutch, we say u. And a popular way of addressing the user. So if your organization is English language based, that's a bit of a risk. Look, for instance, at this order confirmation I received. I think the content that's being translated comes from two sources. Above the line, it's really popular, dankjewel, and je bestelling. But below the line, it's all formal again. It feels a bit like, you know, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hilfiger. Translating is dangerous anyway. When my wife went browsing for some nice pullovers on this Canada Goose website, she saw the button to your left-hand side, Shop Women. And a day later, she went to the Dutch language website of Canada Goose. And there the button was translated as Koop Vrouwen, which means buy women. It might be quite a different website. I don't know. Ordering things is always dangerous and you meet all kinds of content types. I'm sure you're familiar with this question mark button. It's put there to give the user some extra additional information or some help. And as a content designer, I'm always eager to hit these buttons to check if they really went out of their way to give me some extra information. And well, if I want to know what international tracked service is, I better step out of this customer journey and ask Google instead. Some more observations, I'm almost done. I still had to unblock my debit card, my bank's debit card. Last week I lost my bank card and I blocked it so that nobody could misuse it. But I found it again in my other trouser pocket. So now I want to go to the bank's website and unblock it. So when I came to the unblocking section, I met 4 calls to action, each with a slight difference. Unblock debit card. Unblock your card now. Unblock your card with an arrow. Unblock now. So it feels a bit like at the bank, they're making their call to actions a bit up on the fly. Oh, and in another browser window, I still have my work open. I was working for something that's called UForce, and happily they sent me this message to warn me that my browser window was still open. The only point, of course, is even though I read this message 3 times, I still don't know if it's okay to hit OK. So where this message is meant to be reassuring, it only makes me more anxious than I already am. You know, content can not only break your user experience, but it can also make your user experience in a really nice way. Look at this example from MailChimp. They have a real nice way of saying okay. And in one go, they keep me posted of the status of my campaign. I think this is really a nice example of a good tone of voice. Or maybe you can look at this example from Singapore Airlines. Their tone of voice is all about comfort and all about luxury. I see a word like privileges, comfort. I see champagne. And if I want to book a flight and I go to the booking form, I can also choose a title, not only Miss or Mr., but also like President or Prince or Princess. So this is a nice way of applying this luxury tone of voice in a consistent way throughout different phases of my customer journey. Well, I could go on forever showing nice examples, but maybe it's good if I tell you something more about content. For lots of stakeholders in organizations, content is some sort of gray, misty area that has something to do with text and images, and especially the decision makers mostly just want to know if there's someone who covers the content, and then it's okay. But maybe we could have a closer look at what content in fact is. This might be a nice broad definition of what is content. A complete collection of all this. The only problem is, of course, if this is your definition of content, no wonder that you don't know how to map it on something like a customer journey, because this is all way too much. You can't put it all on one map. So it would be nice if there was a way to filter or categorize or something like that. And of course, there is a way. You have to break up the content in separate, discrete pieces. If you ask me what is content, well, it's this, but it's also this, and it's also this, and I could go on for a while. Content consists of lots of different tangible elements that each have a role to play in the user experience. And nowadays, content design is all about breaking content up, structuring content, and connecting the pieces to each other in a meaningful way. If you break, for instance, text is another gray, misty area, unless you break it up in smaller elements that have something to say. We content designers call them content chunks. If you design with content chunks, you have a new way of using and reusing the content in different ways, in different designs, on different touch points. So chunking is really hot in content design land. And it might sound a bit abstract, but I'm sure you all have some experience of chunking your own content in your telephone contacts. This is a nice example. If you go to Netflix and you select a series, you get this announcement screen. And in the content designer's eye, this is a screen that is made up by fitting together a number of content chunks. And if you go to the back side, these are the chunks that Netflix used to make the screen you just saw. And these elements have some contents of their own and are connected to one or more elements dependent on the design they're supposed to make. However interesting this may be, content is of course much broader than just things like copy or content structure. Maybe in the announcement of this meeting you saw my quote about content not coming about by chance. You have to plan, you have to think ahead. And that's where content strategy comes in. This would be a nice and easy definition of what content strategy is. You plan for the creation and publication and governance of usable content. And the sooner you start thinking, the better, preferably at the start of the design process, right exactly at the moment where you service designers also come in. I think there are more similarities between a content strategy and a design strategy as a whole. But as I said, content strategy is more than just the copy. You need to take a look at more aspects of content. A complete content strategy also looks at the content structure. It looks at the people involved to govern the content. It looks at the processes that are involved. And at Informaat, we use this visualization. We call it the content strategy wheel to take all these 12 aspects, 16 aspects of content into view and to look where you can go on making it better. For each aspect, you can find ways to improve. And you can use this content wheel as well to do an audit on your existing content and to score how mature your certain aspects of your content strategy is. This content strategy wheel can show you where you stand. In lots of organizations, content is organized in different silos, what I call the classic silos. Maybe you will recognize some of these. And all these silos can all differ on these aspects. Maybe it's different tooling, maybe they allocate less resources, maybe they have a different message to convey. And the content strategy wheel, there we go. This content strategy wheel is a good way to recognize these gaps and start talking them over. Anyway, maybe you've already heard some things that relate to your work as a service designer, like being involved at the start of the design process. And let's take a further look where we meet as content designers and service designers. Because I think, we have so much in common. We both make things that are made for people. And those things have lots of backstage processes and systems that you have to take into view and maybe take into account. We both go through phases like discovery and ideation and early validation with the user. The things we make are always experienced in touch points, and these touch points deliver a certain user experience. Let's hope it's an excellent user experience. And if you take this into view, you might wonder why content isn't always part of any service design initiative. And if I go to service design settings and I talk to stakeholders, most stakeholders agree that content has a big impact on user experience. And if I then look around and see the brown papers hanging there and I see no traces of content, I can't resist to raise my finger and ask the big bold question, where is the content? And the answers I'm bound to get are about like this. Like, there's no budget at the moment, or there's no time at the moment to take content into consideration. And really, I don't think these are valid reasons, because if you don't want to spend budget or time at the start of the process, at content, you'll have to do it later on. And if you do it later on, you're bound to have to spend more budget and time to fix things that you could have been doing right when you did it at the start. A third reason I always hear is, well, content's no priority at this moment. And well, in a way, this might be a valid argument. I can imagine if you want to map out the customer journey, it's a big process. You have to map out the stages, the steps. You want to apply different personas to the customer journey. There's lots to do, takes hours. And the last thing you want is a number of content designers who also need time and attention to do their thing. So it might be a good idea to do a second mapping session, especially for content design. So no priority might be a valid argument. Two of the other arguments you hear is, well, there is so much content and oh, we don't want to go into so much detail at the moment. But I think that's all a matter of scoping. And how that's being done, I can show you that in the rest of my presentation. Let's zoom in on the customer journey. I think the customer journey is an artifact you all know way better than I do. But I think there are ways to apply content to customer journeys. If I talk to other content designers about customer journeys, I always like to first tell them a bit, especially if they have no service design experience whatsoever, to tell them about customer journeys. And this is the definition I show them. It's about the visualization of the interactions that the user experience in every phase and step on all touch points. And after that, I might show them a visualization of one customer journey we made at Informaat. By the way, the subject of this customer journey is a food box service called Marley Spoon. I don't know if you know it. We're going to have some experience with the Marley food box service in our workshop later on. This customer journey map clearly shows the phases that the user goes through and the steps that she takes, the emotions and quotes that she experiences, the pain points, hopefully not too much, and the touch points that she goes to. So how to add content to a map? We propose you just take another piece of brown paper and stick it on under the existing map. And there you have a nice platform to map out content considerations on every step that you already have. But as I said, content considerations, content is a very broad field. So it would be nice to categorize or select specific types of content considerations to add to your map. And of course, that's possible. In content design land, it's sort of best practice to add 1 but 4 content lanes to your customer journey map. And we fill it with these subjects: the purpose of the content involved, the topics of the content, the types of the content, and the formats. Let's explain a bit and zoom in on those topics. The purpose of the content for the user. What's the point of the content in this step or in this phase? Why would I see it? Maybe the user wants to be educated or informed or entertained in case of the Netflix series. So that's the purpose of the content, and you can map it out in every step. This is a nice example when I was uploading, updating my Garmin navigation thingy. I was a bit anxious, and then I got this message: we've got it from here. And then I felt a bit reassured. So reassurance is the purpose of this piece of content. Second thing you could put in a content lane is topics. The topic of the content. What's the subject that the user is looking for? What's the content about? In case of the Marley Spoon food box, a topic I would look for is, would my kids like to eat this, or is the food organic? Marley Spoon knows this, of course, and in their menu they have these nice topics with a photograph of their dish, a name, a bit of a description, and also nice tags. One of them says child friendly. So, well, here I can find some answers to the topics that I'm looking for. A third content lane might be filled with something that I call content types. Maybe some explanation is needed. A content type is a piece of content fit together from these small elements I was talking about, a piece of content with a discrete form and function. Remember the announcement screen from Netflix? That might be regarded as a content type, the announcement screen. Content types you regularly encounter, maybe even without knowing it, are things like a product detail or an instruction or a review. Content types are typically bound to the phase where the user finds himself in the customer journey. For instance, a review would come really in handy when I'm orientating myself on a service and I can look what other users say about it. On the other hand, an instruction on how to cook a certain dish would really come in handy in the usage phase and not in the orientation phase. This is the content type instruction that Marley Spoon hands out to their clients. And this is quite another content type, an FAQ item. This is a list of content types that you would typically encounter in certain phases of the customer journey. And you can make it longer than this. This is just the first sample. I hope you can remind it now because we're gonna, now you can find this list on the Miro board later on. The last but not least lane of content are filled with content formats. Well, that's pretty straightforward. In which form is it presented? It might be a PDF or a video or a complete website, or maybe a piece of narrow casting I see on the train station. Formats are typically bound to the preference of the persona. Some personas like to download a PDF, print it out, and take it with them to the kitchen to cook, and other personas might take their iPad and just watch the video. So these are 4 types of content lanes that are sort of best practice in content design land, but they're not carved in stone. When the situation arises, you can use these content lanes as well for other means. For instance, you can map the messages that the content conveys in certain steps or in certain phases. You could do a check on the consistency of your tone and voice on the different touch points or in the different phases. It's also nice to do a check on the language level. For instance, with government content, this is really a crucial point. Might also be nice to check if the values of the user and the values of the organization are regarded by the content in every step or in every touch point. So you can use the content lanes in multiple ways. Anyway, it's time to wrap it up, I think. Why would you add content to a customer journey? Let's name a number of reasons I told you about. Obviously, to see all the content on all touch points through the customer's eyes, and to understand which user experience the content delivers. You can identify certain inconsistencies. You can check if there's a fit in the needs of the user and the goals of the organization. Content specialists get to see the bigger picture if they think about customer journeys. And I think that's really nice for people like service designers who like to educate people in what the bigger picture is. And also content people will be involved sooner, which is really nice for the content people who you always hear complaining about how they're at the end of the pipeline. And it's relevant as well because they can start planning resources. For instance, if our customer journey shows that we need a video somewhere, it would be really great if I could start planning 2 months ahead instead of 1 week before the deadline. And overall, of course, you add content to a journey because it delivers a better user experience. And that's the main reason why we're all in this business. So with these wise words, I'd like to ask if you're already hungry to get your hands dirty and do some content journeying. And maybe there are some questions I can answer right now. Thanks for all your attention.
All right.
Do we have any questions?
No. Well, thank you for your presentation, Mark. My name is Iñigo. I'm a colleague of Mark. I'm the service designer that Susanna introduced. We don't really have any questions, at least not in the chat that I had that I could gather. I'm wondering if what I've seen is that some people actually had problems coming into the meetup. I think it had to do that they were not getting the link, maybe because people who were actually registered did not unregister. That means that they got the link, much later, or as people unregistered. So I think we're going to try to share some of the slides later, and in the exercise that we're going to do in a couple of minutes, we are going to. There are already a couple of the main slides or main messages that we gave in the presentation, so hopefully it will be enough for you to make the little exercise. But I see a question from Darina, and she's asking if you have any special tip for content bits that relate to different phases of the journey. I think that since we are in a small group, I think, Darina, if you want to just ask the question yourself and specify it, maybe that's better.
Okay. Hi. Yeah, I was working on a project where different phases of the journey were happening back and forth a bit because it was very explorative behavior on the website, like how to discover, how to deal with a certain sickness, and the same content, the same articles and content bits were necessary for different phases in the journey, like when you're still exploring what to do up to when you already are accepting your sickness. Do you have any tips how to make such content appropriate for both phases, or not at all? Like, do you have any tips?
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that immediately jumps to my mind is, because if I understand your question right, you would like to reuse the same piece of content in different phases. And one of the keys to do that, I think, is to chunk it up in certain portions. And a part of this content might really be relevant in the discovery phase of the patient, and another piece of the content might be much more relevant in the treatment phase or in the discussions with your doctor. So chunking up is, I think, a prerequisite to do that and to be able to reuse the same piece of content in different stages and different steps of your customer journey.
Thank you.
All right. Are there any other questions? Any other thoughts? I guess not. I see that Mena is asking if we can put some of the slides because he missed big part of the presentation. Hopefully you're gonna see them soon, because I think we can move to the next step of the workshop, and that's already getting our hands a bit dirty and going into, well, trying it out, what you just saw in the presentation. So what I'm going to do, the thing is that now we're gonna move from Zoom into Miro. So that's going to be a bit exciting. Hopefully everything will be fine. I'm going to share with you a link in the chat a link to Miro. Let's see if it works. There it goes. So if you look into the chat, you'll find a link to a Miro board. For the people who don't know, Miro is this online collaboration tool. It's kind of a big whiteboard where you can, create everything, write things, write notes, add pictures. So I would ask you to please follow this.
Have we all returned to the plenary room now?
I am back.
You're back.
Everybody's back, eh? Yeah.
All right.
How did it go?
Yeah, so the idea right now is to have a quick discussion of the impressions that you had, guys, while you were trying this out. Even if it was for a very short time, of course, we realized that it's very, a bit superficial. But it would be great if you can share some of your, some of your thoughts, some of your findings. Actually, if you go in Miro to step number 5, you can click at the bottom of the workspace to go there. There are some questions or triggering topics. What did you think that went well? What was difficult for you? And any questions you have, please share them. I think that since we are in quite a small group, I think we can just, people can unmute and ask a question.
There's already one question in the chat.
Yeah. Jean-Marie said, can you provide an example of a waypoint for content purpose? All right, let's see.
For a content purpose.
Yeah.
In fact, if you think from the perspective of the user, what's the point of this content? Why do I see this content here at this moment, at this step in my customer journey? Content purpose. Remember, Gillian sees this advertisement and she goes to on her mobile phone to the website of Marley Spoon. What's the purpose of the content she would need in that stage? Of course, the purpose would be to interest her more, to persuade her to go on, to show her what's in it for her. And in fact, to start the dialogue with her on one or more of the topics that she's interested in.
Okay. I think also what I understood from Waypoint is also it's a content that helps you get to somewhere else actually. So a direct link from actually if you had a poster with a QR code that you take a picture and takes you to where you can find more information, that could also be a waypointing content, I believe. Okay. We have another question. Oh yeah, this question from Edgar. And the question is, where do you apply these kind of lanes? Are they in the assist customer journey or in a to-be customer journey or in both?
Yeah, the question already popped up in one of the breaking rooms I attended. Yeah. If you want to do it right, of course, first you do a as-is journey to really reproduce the experiences that the user experiences at this moment. And after that, you do it all over again, including an ideation session to make a to-be journey. That would be the greatest thing. But if you do a as-is journey, without even wanting it, you already get these ideas. So if you do an as-is journey, it might be a great idea to already prepare a piece of brown paper as a parking space for the ideas that already spontaneously pop up.
Mm-hmm. All right. We have another question, and that is, how much time would you normally use to map these steps?
Dependent, of course, on the length of the complete journey. The complete journey in the Marley Spoon case comprises about 15 to 20 steps. And if you map 4 content lanes times 20 steps, and you do it with 3 people, you can imagine, well, it takes a morning or an afternoon, at least a couple of hours, if you want to do it good. I've been to sessions where we allotted, for instance, 4 hours to do the complete journey, and we still didn't have enough time because there was lots of discussion. It also depends on whether the stakeholders agree or not on every post-it that they are going to stick on. If there's a lot of discussion about these post-its, of course it takes longer.
Actually, in that sense, I hope that I summarize the questions of other people that I have heard. What you just said is like you took like 4 hours, but was that already with a already mapped customer journey to which you were adding the content things, or was it for the entire process?
No, it was an already existing customer journey.
Okay.
I just added this piece of brown paper to it.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that the tip a bit is like you don't need to do everything in one time, but make sure that you have a base customer journey. And maybe before you start adding the post-its or the content to these different lanes, you should also try to agree on which lanes about content considerations are the most relevant. Mm-hmm. And make sure that everybody knows the definition of everything, because otherwise there's going to be you should try to avoid that discussion in advance. Okay, we have another question, and that is, in your experience, are there big differences in the approach for B2C versus B2B? And if yes, what can you watch out for?
Well, of course, there are differences. Whether they are big or not, I wouldn't know. For instance, if you're in the B2C sector, it's easy to use a persona, a customer persona. And if you're in the business to business, what persona is there for the other business? So first you need to have certain personas within this business that you target, because your content is not read by a business, but it's read by a person. So you have to pinpoint which persons, which personas you target in this business. That's a big difference, of course. And what I've been doing this customer journey, content journey workshop at a business-to-business firm, and they also said, well, what we really like to know is to check whether our tone of voice is all right, because our tone of voice is always business to customer directed, but other business people don't want to be addressed as if they're a particular customer. They want to be addressed with their own jargon, with their own language, with their own business to business words. So a tone of voice check or a terminology check would be a really great asset to such a customer journey.
Cool, thank you. We have another question. Great guys, it's good that questions are popping up. From Sana, she asks, which kind of people do you invite for such a sessions?
Remember, in my presentation, I was talking about these organizational silos where content lives or is managed or originates somehow. I would always advocate to look at what silos there are, invite people from all those silos, because chances are they don't meet so much in ordinary practice. And this might be the great platform to let them talk maybe for the first time about content considerations. So look at all the different silos. I always like to invite people like product owners, because, well, they're the guys guarding the budget and the time, and they also have an idea about their product or their service. And it would be really great to invite subject matter experts, these people who own the facts and the figures, because they're most of the time they are the sources of the real thing, of the content you're after. And these people often are frustrated because they have the facts and the figures, but they can't play their role to the full. And this is a platform where they really can step up and get their own role in the whole customer journey. I might give an example. I was working at an insurance, a health insurance company. Every year, every health insurance company publishes their how much people get paid if they go to the doctor, how much of that is rewarded back to them. And there was one man who had all these figures every year and published it once a year. And he had to send these figures to different organizational silos who all did their own thing with it in order to publish it in a leaflet or on the website, or give it to customer care for all the telephone calls. And this guy really went crazy because every organizational silos had different questions, had different needs. And these people are really crucial to invite in a session like this.
All right. I think there are no more questions. If there's, well, I think there's still time for one more question. So if somebody's very fast typing, then now is your chance, I would say. Or if you want to be bold enough to unmute and just ask the question. But otherwise, I think we're getting...
I'm not good at typing fast, so I'll do the
for it.
boldness part. How can the content journey mapping, which I understood as being a valuable extension to the actual journey mapping, can be used, for example, to align or to focus like several, not siloed, but several parallel, disjointed or uncoordinated like measures of communication from marketing to anywhere, like 14 different actions without any syncing amongst these. So leading to not one brand voice, but just like a whole bunch of people talking different stuff. And how can this be used? Yeah, as an effect to the customer. How can this tool be used in order to help catching all these loose ends and somehow coordinate it or define a common focus in tone and voice, for example?
Yeah. Well, the great thing about these sessions is, of course, that all the participants, you force all the participants to see the content through the eyes of the customer. And that's really important as such, because I think that of all these people that have their different loose initiatives, a number of them never looks through the eyes of the customer. So that's one talking point you create at this moment. And you say, okay, maybe we all have different things we find important, but this is the thing we can share and we all find equally important. And what you can do is ask all these people to take their touch points with them, to show their touch points, and then pinpoint inconsistencies. For instance, in base terminology. How do you call the most important entities within your service? And why does John give it a different name than Mary does? And what's at the core of that is these content chunks I already mentioned. You have to give it the same terms. And if you do that, you connect these entities on the right way, then everybody sees the bigger picture. So it's all a matter of creating a bigger picture by getting at the same level.
Yeah.
Hope this makes any sense to you.
Yeah. If I might add something, I think depending in which how mature that organization is around content. So what's the content maturity? If you remember, well, I think Benno, you missed that slide of Mark in the presentation. But maybe at the very beginning, you can start a bit like what Mark said, just ask everybody to bring the touch points they sent, because actually the first stage can be to shock them a bit, and to shock and shame a bit. At least in my experience, that works sometimes very well, because a lot of different parts of the organization, with the best intentions, they try to inform the customer, but what you get is a huge overload of things with a lot of inconsistencies, as Mark said. So if you have a bit of a journey and you ask everybody to bring, what are you sending to the customer? And you put everything together, because nobody sees what other people are also sending, that can be very shocking. It's just like, wow, with the best intentions, we are just sending so much stuff that the customer cannot actually find what he wants or what she wants, because you know, if I get 10 emails in one day or different things, then of course there's an overload of information, and that's what you probably want to avoid. But that's beginning.
In cases like this, in cases like that, mostly the answer is not we make another piece of new content. The answer might be we kill another number of pieces of our content.
Yeah, that's definitely the less is more thing. Yeah. All right, good. I think we're getting to the end of it. So in Mido, that's step 6. I see that some of you already have left some post-its with a top, something that was nice, and something that can be better for the next time. So thank you for that. If you still haven't done it, please add a post-it to tell us how it went, what did you like, what can be better for the next time, so we can learn. And below that, you have a thank you note. So thank you very much for being with us this afternoon. You can see the email of Mark and my email if you want to get in touch with us to ask more questions, to get some more information, to grab a virtual coffee in those times. I think that's it, actually. Suzanne, would you like to add something else?
I would like to add a very big thank you to you, Mark, and Iñigo for organizing and facilitating this workshop. To all the participants, thank you for engaging so well.
Yes.
Yeah, like Iñigo and Mark said, if you want to contact them, please do. If you can help you in applying content journeys, don't hesitate to contact. And otherwise, maybe we see on the next meetup, which will be on the 2nd of June, and which will be about future probing. So that's about how to, how to make sure that you can take care or take into account future in your service designs, which will also be an interactive meetup, as a bit similar to this one. So for now, thank you very much, and have a nice evening.
Yeah.
Thank you all, same to you.
Okay.
Have a nice evening. Thank you. Bye.